"You don't belong here, Dad. This isn't your day." That's what my daughter, Emily, said to me on the morning of her wedding. She looked me dead in the eye, standing there in a white dress I had paid for, in a country club hall I had helped reserve with my credit card. Her words cut deeper than any knife. The band was setting up in the corner. The smell of fresh flowers filled the air, roses and lilies I had personally ordered. Guests in polished shoes and fancy dresses milled around the reception hall, sipping champagne. Yet there I was, being told by my only daughter that I wasn't welcome. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us where you're watching from. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 64 years old, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. I've been a mechanic most of my life. My hands are rough, my back aches most mornings, but I built a decent life out of honest work. My wife passed 10 years ago, leaving me to raise Emily on my own. I gave her everything I could. Every scraped dollar went to braces, school supplies, prom dresses, and eventually college tuition. I thought she understood the sacrifices. I thought she was grateful. But when she met Nathan, the man she was marrying, today, things shifted. Nathan came from money, or at least he pretended he did. Flashy suits, big talk about real estate investments, and a smirk that never left his face. He was the kind of guy who looked down on men with grease under their fingernails. Emily fell hard for him, and somewhere along the way, I became the relic in her eyes, the father she didn't need anymore. The wedding day confirmed it. When I arrived early to help, Emily pulled me aside. "Dad," she whispered sharply, "I think it would be better if you didn't mingle too much. Nathan's family thinks you're a little rough around the edges. They don't understand." I stared at her, my own daughter, and felt my heart sink. "Emily, I'm your father. I raised you. How can you say that?" She glanced away. "Please, Dad, don't cause a scene. Just stay quiet. Sit in the back." The humiliation stung worse than any broken bone. I sat alone in the last row of the church during the ceremony. I watched her walk down the aisle, her arm looped through Nathan's, as if I were just another guest. I listened as she said vows about loyalty and trust, words that felt like ashes in my ears. And when the crowd cheered and the bells rang, I realized something important. She thought she had erased me from this moment. She thought I was powerless. But she was wrong, because I held a secret that would change everything. One she and Nathan never saw coming. And when I revealed it, their perfect little wedding day would collapse like a house of cards. "Robert, you should really try the shrimp cocktail." That's what Nathan's mother said to me at the reception, her words dripping with sarcasm. She didn't even look at me while saying it, just waved her champagne glass in my direction like I was the hired help. I sat at a small round table near the edge of the ballroom, pushed so far into the corner I might as well have been outside. The chandeliers sparkled above, the DJ was setting up for the first dance, and laughter floated through the air. But none of it reached me. Every other table was full of smiles, toasts, and family chatter. Mine was empty. No one wanted to sit with the mechanic father. Nathan's father, slick gray hair, Rolex shining under the lights, made a toast about new beginnings. His voice boomed through the microphone. "Today, our son Nathan joins a family of excellence, of success. We welcome Emily into a world of opportunity. She's marrying up, and she knows it." The room laughed. Glasses clinked, and I sat there, frozen, my blood boiling. Marrying up. That's what he thought of me? That's what my daughter thought of me? I stared at Emily across the room. She avoided my eyes. Hey, old man. I turned to see Nathan himself, strolling toward me with a swagger in his step. His tie loosened, his smile wide. He leaned down, his hand gripping my shoulder. Appreciate you coming out tonight. I know this isn't really your scene, but don't worry. We've got Emily covered now. You don't have to carry her anymore. His voice was casual, but the words were knives. I pushed his hand off. Nathan, you don't know the first thing about carrying anyone. He smirked. Oh, I know plenty. I know Emily won't be struggling to pay rent anymore. She won't be clipping coupons or driving beat-up Chevys. She's got me now. He tapped his chest. The future. I clenched my jaw. My fingers dug into the tablecloth, knuckles white. You think money makes you a man? I asked quietly. Nathan leaned closer, so only I could hear. I think being broke makes you irrelevant. He walked away before I could answer, leaving his words like poison in the air. I sat there for what felt like hours, watching the evening unfold. The cake was cut, the bouquet was tossed, and everyone danced under the glow of fairy lights. Everyone, except me. Every now and then, Emily glanced my way. Once, our eyes met, and for a split second, I saw guilt flicker in her face. But she looked away quickly, slipping back into Nathan's orbit. The humiliation was complete. But as I watched them, my mind wasn't on the insults or the toasts. It was on the folder sitting in my desk drawer at home. The folder Emily had never seen. Inside it was paperwork she thought didn't exist anymore. Documents I'd kept locked away since her mother passed. She thought Nathan's family was her golden ticket. She thought their wealth made me irrelevant. But she didn't know that the one thing Nathan prized most, the very foundation of his flashy life, was tied to me. And when the time came to reveal it, the truth would hit harder than any insult he could throw. The morning after the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of black coffee and the folder. The house was quiet, sunlight streaming through half-closed blinds, dust floating in the air like tiny ghosts of the past. I opened the folder slowly, almost reverently. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years. The deed to the lakefront cabin up in Hocking Hills, the life insurance policy from Emily's mother, and, most important, the trust fund papers. Wendy, my wife passed. I set aside everything I could into a trust for Emily's future. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to give her a cushion, enough to help her build a life. She never knew the details, only that I'd put away some money for her someday. But here was the catch Nathan didn't know. I had made myself the trustee. Emily couldn't access a dime without my approval, and more than that, the trust was tied to specific conditions. Conditions I had written with the lawyer after long nights of thinking about what kind of man might come sniffing around my daughter someday. If Emily ever married someone with significant outstanding debt, the trust was frozen until either the debt was cleared or the marriage was dissolved. And Nathan? His so-called real estate ventures were nothing but a pile of overdue loans and unpaid taxes. I knew, because a buddy of mine at the county clerk's office had whispered it to me weeks ago. I closed the folder and leaned back, the chair creaking under my weight. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something other than shame. I felt control. I drove into town that afternoon and stopped at McCarthy & Sons, the small law office I'd used for decades. The same place that had handled the deed to my house, my will, and the trust itself. Mr. McCarthy, glasses perched low on his nose, looked up as I walked in. Robert Hayes. Been a while. What brings you in today? I placed the folder on his desk. I think it's time we reminded my daughter's new husband who actually holds the cards. He opened the papers, adjusted his glasses, and nodded slowly. Ah, yes. I remember drafting this. Smart move, Robert. Most folks wouldn't have thought this far ahead. I grunted. Most folks didn't raise Emily. I knew one day some slick talker would come along. He tapped the trust document. If Nathan's debts are what I hear they are, then the conditions are triggered automatically. The trust is frozen, which means Nathan won't see a cent of Emily's inheritance. And if he tries? I asked. McCarthy smiled thinly. Then he'll run straight into me and the courts. That night, the phone rang. Emily's voice was hesitant. Dad? Can we talk? I sighed. Of course. What's on your mind? Nathan and I were counting on some money you'd set aside for the down payment on a new place. He said you'd already promised it years ago. I clenched my jaw. No, Emily. I promised to take care of you, not him. She was silent for a long moment. Dad, are you saying you won't release it? I chose my words carefully. I'm saying thy key trust doesn't allow it, not while Nathan owes money to half the county. Her breath hitched. What? He told me those debts were just business investments. They're not investments, Emily. They're anchors, and if you're not careful, they'll drag you. Down with him. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. Finally, she whispered, Dad, what have you done? I closed my eyes. What I should have done a long time ago. Protected you, even from yourself. When I hung up, I knew I had crossed a line. There was no going back. The battle wasn't just coming. It was already here. And the next move wouldn't be mine. It would be Nathan's. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days after that phone call, I was summoned, yes, summoned, by my own daughter and her new husband to dinner at their place. It wasn't an invitation. It was more like a demand. Dad, Emily had said on the phone, her tone stiff, rehearsed. Nathan thinks it's best if we clear the air. Over dinner. Can you come by Friday? I almost said no, but something in me wanted to see this through, wanted to look that boy in the eyes when his little empire of lies came crashing down. So I agreed. Their house was a 2-story colonial on the edge of town, the kind with white shutters and a porch swing that hadn't seen much use. Nathan liked to brag he'd bought it outright, but I knew the truth. The mortgage was hanging by a thread, and the bank was already breathing down his neck. When I walked in, the smell of steak filled the air. Emily had set the table with the good china, the wedding gifts they'd received. Everything looked perfect, polished. But underneath, I could feel the tension crackling like static. Nathan sat at the head of the table, a glass of bourbon in his hand, his smile sharp as a knife. Robert, he said, rising just enough to shake my hand. His grip was firm, too firm, the kind meant to prove something. Glad you could make it. I sat down, studying him. Let's get to it, Nathan. You didn't invite me here for steak. He chuckled. Straight to business. Fine. Emily tells. Me, you've been withholding what's rightfully hers. Emily's eyes darted to me, nervous. I could see the conflict in her face, caught between her love for me and her loyalty to her husband. I folded my hands on the table. It's not being withheld. The trust has conditions. You know that. Nathan leaned back, smirk widening. Conditions that a reasonable man would overlook. You're her father, Robert. Why stand in the way of her happiness? Her happiness isn't the problem, I said evenly. Your debts are. That wiped the smirk off his face for a second. But only a second. He recovered quickly. "Every successful man has debts," he said smoothly. "That's how business works." I pulled out an envelope from my jacket and slid it across the table. "Not like this. These are liens, unpaid property taxes, and defaulted loans, all in your name. Do you want me to read the amounts out loud, or would you like to spare Emily?" The humiliation! Emily's hand shot out, snatching the envelope. She flipped through the papers, her face draining of color. "Nathan," she whispered. "Tell me this isn't true." Nathan reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "It's exaggerated," he said quickly. "Numbers on paper, nothing more. Once I get access to your inheritance, all of that will be cleared up." And there it was, the slip, the truth he couldn't quite keep buried. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She looked at me, then back at him. "So that's why you married me? For the money?" The room went dead silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Nathan's jaw tightened. He tried to laugh it off. "Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. I love you, Em. But your father is being unreasonable. He's trying to control you, even now." I leaned forward, my voice low, steady. "I'm not controlling her. I'm protecting her. Something you should have been doing, Nathan." Emily's tears spilled over. She stood abruptly, pushing her chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "I need some air," she whispered, rushing toward the porch. For a moment it was just Nathan and me, the air thick with anger. He dropped the act, his voice sharp, venomous. "You think you've won, old man? You think you can stand between me and what I deserve?" I held his gaze. "I don't need to stand between you and anything, Nathan. You're going to destroy yourself. All I did was make sure you don't. Take Emily down with you." Nathan slammed his fist against the table, rattling the dishes. "This isn't over." But deep down, I could see it in his eyes. It was, and the whole town was about to know it. Because the next morning, McCarthy filed the papers that made the trust conditions public record. And in a place like our small Ohio town, secrets don't stay buried long. By the following week, the whispers had already spread. Small towns have a way of chewing through gossip like fresh corn cobs at a county fair. At the diner on Main Street, folks leaned over their coffee mugs, lowering their voices just enough to make it feel secretive. "You hear about that new son-in-law of Robert Hayes?" "Yeah, the one with the shiny cufflinks and no real job?" "Turns out he's neck-deep in debt. Marrying for money, they say." Nathan hated small-town eyes on him. Every time he strutted down the street, folks used to nod politely. Now they smirked. Now they knew. The final blow came 2 weeks later at church, of all places. Pastor Wilson had asked me to say a few words during Sunday fellowship, something about fathers standing strong for their families. I didn't plan to say much, but when I saw Emily slip in late, eyes red from crying, and Nathan nowhere in sight, I knew what I had to do. I stepped up to the podium, the sunlight streaming through stained glass, painting my shirt in colors. "I've made mistakes in my life," I began, my voice steady. "But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love doesn't come with conditions. Money does. And if a man confuses the two, he'll lose both." There was a quiet murmur through the pews. Folks knew exactly who I was talking about. Emily's eyes met mine across the room. For the first time in months, I saw her not as a child, trapped between loyalties, but as a woman realizing the truth for herself. Later that day, she came by my house. She stood in the doorway, wringing her hands like she used to when she was little, and nervous about something. "Dad," she whispered, "you were right. I opened the door wider. "Come in, Em." She sat at the kitchen table, the same one I'd spent lonely nights at, staring at that folder. But this time, there was no folder between us. Just her. I confronted him. She said softly. He admitted it. "Every word you said. He wanted the money. Not me. Maybe both, but—" She shook her head. "Not in the way I needed." My chest ached, but not with anger this time. With sorrow. With relief. With something like healing. "Sorry you had to learn it this way," I told her. She reached across the table, took my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner." Nathan packed his things a week later. Left town in a borrowed truck, creditors chasing him down the highway. No one bothered to wave goodbye. As for me, I found peace in the quiet. Not the lonely, quiet of before, but the steady kind. The kind that comes from knowing you did right by your family, even when it cost you. The trust remained locked, untouched. Emily decided to start fresh, on her own terms. She took a job at the elementary school, moved back into her old room for a while. It wasn't defeat. It was rebuilding. One evening we sat on the porch swing together, watching the fireflies blink in the dark. She leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was 10. "Dad?" she murmured. "Thank you for protecting me, even when I didn't want you to." And right then, I knew. This was my real inheritance. Not money, not houses, not deeds, but love. Nathan lost everything because he built his life on greed. I regained everything because I held on to love. And that, friends, is poetic justice. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. And if you've ever seen greed tear a family apart, tell us where you're watching from.